Hello everyone, ReeferGil here. In this video we're going to talk about how to do a 50% mud change after 1 year of running Miracle Mud in your system. For those of you who are new to the channel, I've been running Miracle Mud in my system since day one, so it's been over 2 years now that I've been using Miracle Mud. By no means am I promoting Miracle Mud, mineral mud, or any other type of substrate to run in your refugium area. I'm just simply saying that I've only used Miracle Mud. I'm very pleased with the results of my system now, but I wouldn't attribute that to any one reason. Miracle Mud is one of those controversial topics. Once again, some people believe it's just a big scheme to get money out of you to use this substrate for your refugium area. If you really want to get in depth on what Miracle Mud is, I suggest that you purchase the book called The Aquarium Science, Art, and Technology by Charles Delbecq and Julian Sprung. I am going to touch on some of the claims of Miracle Mud, but I'm not going to get too in depth in that. This video is mostly geared on how to change out the Miracle Mud without making that mess in your system. 80% of the Miracle Mud is actually harvested from the ocean's floor. The other 20% is a formulation of essential minerals and trace elements that are time released in your system as the water passes over the Miracle Mud. It's recommended that you change out 50% of your Miracle Mud once every year because those minerals and trace elements are eventually depleted from the mud itself. So you want to introduce new mud to replenish those minerals and trace elements back into your system. Some of the other highlighted claims of the use of Miracle Mud is that it acts as an eraser control for pH, nitrites, nitrates, and phosphates. It also prevents and cures lateral line disease on fish. And it contains over 70 minerals and trace elements in the mud. The recommended amount of Miracle Mud for a system my size is 20 pounds of Miracle Mud. There's absolutely no way I'm getting 20 pounds of mud or substrate in the refugium area of my tank unless I want like a 6-inch deep sand bed, which I do not want. So I'm running about 10 pounds of Miracle Mud. That gives me about 2 inches of substrate in the mud tray itself, and I'll be changing out 5 pounds of it today. One of the main problems or issues with Miracle Mud is its fine silt. It's also buoyant, and it can become suspended in your water column for days, if not weeks, if it's not introduced in your system correctly. I contacted Primo Reef and Acrylics. He made me a custom-made mud tray that matched my trigger system sump. Came out very nice. It makes life a lot easier when you have to do 50% mud changes or introduce mud into your system for the first time. It makes it simple because you can pull the mud out directly out of your sump without making that big mess. It may not look as sexy as having a custom-made tray by Primo Reef and Acrylics, but an alternative would be to just get some Tupperware like this, get as many as you need to fill up the bottom of your refugium area, fill this up with some mud, and then you can make the changes by just using Tupperware. Alright, so it's time to get started with the 50% mud change. Some of the things you may want to consider having on hand before doing this 50% mud change is some polyfilter, a towel, bucket, siphon hose, new mud, and freshly mixed salt water. In my case, I'm going to use 20 gallons. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do is turn off all of your pumps. If your heaters are in the sump area, you want to turn the heaters off too because they will be exposed to air during this process. Next thing you want to do is remove anything that's going to be in your way, like this refugium light, the Chaeto, any rocks that you may have in your refugium, and then finally remove the mud tray. In this case, the mud tray was surprisingly heavy. It was about 20 to 25 pounds, so I needed a little bit of help from my wife. In hindsight, I would have removed all the water from the sump area prior to trying to remove the mud tray. It would have made it a little bit easier. Now it's time to remove the water from the sump area. This Aquarium siphon really comes in handy, especially for those areas where I cannot get gravity-fed water to come out of the system. This thing is going to suck the water right out. One end goes right into the sump area, and then I take the other end and walk it outside to my garden hose where I attach it to. Okay, now that I have the other end of the hose attached to the nozzle, what I'm going to do is turn on the water full blast, And in a second, you're going to see the water coming through the hose. That's the water getting siphoned out of the sump area and out through the other end of the hose. Now here you see the Aquarium siphon doing its work. This is a good time to also siphon out any kind of debris or detritus that might be settled down at the bottom of your sump. Alright, we've come to the point where we're taking 50% of the mud out and replacing it with 50% new mud. If you're running, say, 4 Tupperware containers in your ReeferGil, don't take out just 2 of them and replace it with new mud and then leave the other 2 in there for another year with the stale mud. Rather, take all 4 of them out and do a 50% mud change to all 4 at one time and then put them all back in. That way you have fresh mud in each tray. And that's what I'll be doing with this one. It has 2 compartments. I'm going to take 50% out of one compartment and then 50% out of the other compartment. Take a look at how cloudy the water is in this bucket here. This is what we're trying to avoid getting into our display tank or even in our sump. When you add your new mud into your mud tray, what you want to do is make sure you get that dry mud wet. So you want to use the water that's already in the tray as well as the mud that's in the tray to get that dry mud wet and, well, muddy. This is going to make it less likely for that mud to become buoyant once we fill up the sump with water. You're going to want to add some polyfilter in between your ReeferGil and the next stage of your sump. This is going to catch any kind of loose microalgae as well as any suspended mud after we fill up the sump with water. Go ahead and carefully place your mud tray or mud trays back in the ReeferGil area. Don't do what I did here and end up dropping it. It'd be a bad day if you crack your sump. Grab your Oakland Raiders cup, fill it up with display water, and then dump that water back into the mud tray. At this point, you can let the water settle in the mud tray itself if you like, or you can go ahead and proceed on to the next step. Replace your rock back into the mud tray or your ReeferGil area, and then go ahead and put your macroalgae back in as well. When you start adding water back into the display tank, you want to make sure you do it very slowly. I got my 5-gallon jug, poured the water into the display tank, allowed that water to flow down into the overflow and into the sump, and made sure that the water level rised very slowly in the sump area. I did this for all 5 jugs of water until eventually the sump was filled to the fill line that I have marked off. If after filling up your sump you see that the water is too cloudy, do not turn on the return pumps. Let that mud settle for a few hours. If you're running heaters and they're in your sump area and you live in a cold climate, you may want to consider bringing those heaters up into the display tank to continue warming your system. The water in my sump was a little bit cloudy. Turned on the return pumps. It did cloud up the display tank just a little bit, but as you can see, after only 2 hours, the water was crystal clear. My skimmer did work overtime. As you can see here, it was pulling up some of the extra mud that was floating around. And like I said, after 2 hours, the water was crystal clear. I hope you find this video to be useful for when you have to change out your mud. If you're new to the channel, please hit that subscription button. Thank you all for your support and thank you for watching. We'll see you guys next time.